Alright, this is going to be video number 3 in our first really acrylic drawing and painting. I want to kind of talk a little bit about care of brushes and just the basics of acrylic. So let's switch over here. So I've got I gave you an older brush. I already used one. It's the same as your watercolor one, but it's been used. You can see it's a little bit stained. I think you ought to try to keep your watercolor brushes separate from your acrylic and oils. You just have to definitely make sure that you're washing your brush out really well. So what I do, and I'm sitting at my desk so I can't do that, but I let the water run into my hand and I mix it into my hand. That way I can see if there's paint coming out still. I put a little bit of dishwashing liquid in there, something mild, soap, and then wash, and then let the water run right into in the palm of my hand. And that way I can definitely see if there's still some stuff in there. You want to be really careful about getting it into the ferrule. So when you're mixing, you don't want to just jam that paint up in here, because acrylic is a polymer and it's just a plastic. And so once it's dry, it's pretty dry and impervious to water. So whereas watercolor, if you left your brush filled full of paint, it's not going to be good for it, but we can just run underneath some water and it should come out pretty much. Acrylic is not that way. Oil is not that way. So you don't want to let this dry. Acrylic dries really quickly, so we need to get real careful how you do that. Now, so I would mix it around like this. Now, there's all different kind of brushes, and you may have some brushes at home. I have these are synthetic sable. This is that white Talon. It's synthetic, it's not real hair, and it comes to a nice point. It's a little bit maybe more like a watercolor brush. Then I brought some natural hair brushes. These are hog hair, and these are two different, and hopefully you remember this from the first video. This is a flat, and it's got some sizing in it, so you can kind of see that it's kind of real stiff right now, but the sizing is just some like glue, just so that when it's shipping it looks nice and neat. But this is a filbert, and the filbert just kind of has rounded corners, so sometimes that's a little bit easier, sometimes you want a flat. So they're just two different kind of brushes, so when you're buying something you'll know what you're buying. These are way cheaper. These are hog hair than even this, so I'll probably buy both of these for the same price as this one. Now, as we mix colors and stuff, you can use a palette. I would wash this out all the time, because if it dries, it's going to be plastic. Then you have to peel it out. So I would not use the watercolor one. I think I gave you a clean one as well for oils and acrylics, but I also gave you some real shiny papers like wax paper, and it's really palette paper. And so you could tape this down to a cardboard. I just have it in the pad at the moment. It doesn't soak through. Oils will soak through a little bit, but acrylics don't. What I would do is, when I got some paint out here, I would you could cover it up with saran wrap. It's going to be kind of messy. That's why I gave you one of these where it has a lid, and hopefully it should last, especially a day. It's not going to last a week or so. It's probably just going to still dry out. But if I'm painting a long time, it's maybe a little bit easier on just palette paper. It's make sure that you're doing it on the waxy side, not the flat side. So, and then a lot of times if it's dry, oh well, I just let it dry, and then the next day I come out and pour some more on here. So I'm not throwing this piece of paper away all the time. I didn't give you probably enough to do that every day. So what I did do is I put out some colors here, and I don't need to have all the colors out at the same time, because even if I was going to paint this whole thing today, I've got some green up here in his pants. I don't need the blue out right now if I'm going to work on his skin tone, because all it's going to do is just dry. So we need to do this kind of in a timely fashion here. I've got a couple different colors here, and I thought you can kind of play around. This is primary magenta, and is really this is pretty inexpensive paint. You can get some other stuff. You don't need this big a bottle at Hobby Lobby or whatever. But primary magenta is more the color of printer's ink, so it might make a good color for us. I also have just a bright red. This is more, I would say, more of a alizarin crimson. It's kind of just a good basic red. It's kind of in between alizarin crimson and cadmium red. And then I have a cadmium yellow deep, which is this color over here. And then I have, which is a warmer color, and then I have cadmium yellow light. It's still kind of on the warm because it's cadmium. It's not lemon yellow, but it's a little bit lighter. What you need is basically, I would say, 4 or 5 colors to begin with. A red, a yellow, a blue, if you want to go really minimalistic, and then a black and a white. Some people would say not black. In this case, we're going to use just straight black because it's cartoon. And then I have some white. You could also use, my computer's all messed up here. You could also use a warm and a cool if you have a little bit more money. So a cadmium and a lemon yellow. Acrylic paints and oil paints, they all kind of sometimes have different names, but primarily the basic ones are going to still be cadmiums are warm. Alizarin crimson is cooler. You have ultramarine blue, which is a kind of a cooler blue. You could have a phthalo blue, or you could have a there's a variety of different kind of blues, like cobalt blue or a cerulean blue. But just stick with the basic colors, because if you're going to mix, if you're going to make colors over and over and over each day, it's going to be easier if you only have a few colors that you're going to really mix. If you have a hooker's green and a viridian green and a leaf green, and then you're constantly remembering, well, what color did I use to make that tree? So if you only have 3 colors or 4 colors, then you know that it's some sort of combination of those very basic ones. So we're not going to use very much water, only really water to wash out our brush. We're not going to water it down like we would have with watercolor. I'm just going to set that there. So I wet my brush and I didn't really need to. So I'm going to try to make this skin color here right now. So okay, as we make this skin color, I'm going to try some, it's kind of a warmish tan color. So I'm going to use a little bit of red. Now, these are powerful colors, so we be kind of careful. I'm just going to try to not get this all over the place. So that, see, you can see already the red is way more dominant than the yellow. So I probably should have started with the yellow and added some red. Because now I'm going to have to keep making it yellow and yellow and yellow, and maybe it's going to be too much. I'm going to make too much color and not enough paint there. So I'm keeping it kind of calm here. Now on the camera there, that's really super orange. I could dab in here a little bit and get some white. And that kind of gives me an idea a little bit better of what kind of color that is. And it's still pretty yellow. So that's not really as fleshy as I would like. So maybe I'll take a little bit of this magenta. A little bit more skin tone-ish here. So I'm going to mix that up here. I don't need a whole lot. It looks like it's still orange, so I'm going to take a little bit of that pink and some more white. So this color's more fleshy now here. A little bit more white. It's quite the right value. So I'm getting the right hue here, but I'm not getting the right value. So the hue is the actual color, and the value is the lightness. So I'm trying to keep this nice all in one little pile here. And the camera's not picking this up very well, but so if I kind of come over here, yeah, it's not very light, so you can't see it very well, but I want to make sure I'm mixing that up so even the edges, the fringes, are the same color, so that I'm not dipping in twice. So you can see my brush has kind of got a little red streaky in there, so I need to keep mixing, but I don't want to make that puddle really very big. Still, the value is not quite right. It needs to be much whiter there. That's looking pretty good. I'm gonna get this out of the way. It looks a little pinker on the screen than it does here on my palette. My palette looks pretty decent now. So I'm gonna kind of be careful, and I'm going to go maybe even on top of the line a little bit. And so this is going to be probably transparent enough that I'm going to be able to see my lines through it. So I can go ahead and paint over that top of that nose because I can see that line still. But I really don't want to get any place that I don't want that color, just like that. That was terrible. So kind of like watercolor here, you've got to be really careful. It's kind of training your brush, and I've got so much paint in the body of the brush now that it's not wanting to come to a very sharp point. I need to be really careful. And then sometimes on the edge, I have to kind of lay my paintbrush down. If I lay my paintbrush down like this and pull, I can get a pretty thin line. If I try to do it just with the tip, then I run out of paint sometimes. So sometimes I try to lay it down as much as I can. I can get this little bead right along the edge, and I can get a reasonably straight line. So don't be afraid to turn your board here. It's going to go out of frame, so I would turn. But if I was going to paint this for real here, I would probably turn my board so that I'm always kind of pulling down toward me. I'm going to get a much straighter line. I've got limited space here, and I've already made a mess here. I could turn it. And the more that I can pull straight down toward my torso, the straighter the line is going to be. Okay, and then when I get in the corners, I can go back up to that tip of the brush a little bit. So we're not doing any gradients or anything here on this first one. Just want you to get used to mixing some colors, using it full strength. Really fight the urge to add some water. So in order to do that though, you're going to have to make sure that you're mixing enough, but we're not needing to make 10 gallons of it either. Okay, I wish my lighting was a little bit better. And then the hand. And so I can be a little more aggressive because this paint is not very opaque, and so it's going to show my pencil lines through all this. Right there, I had a large amount of paint kind of in the body of the brush, and so I kind of just was trying to pull it down more to the tip. I guess the back of his hand is right there. Now we are going to put a black outline, so you know, I think it's best to be as smooth as you can, but the black outline will cover up some evils if you're not quite as exact as you'd like to be. Try to keep it a consistent thickness, especially on the edges. You don't want to have a big roll of paint or a big kind of glob at the edge. So we want to kind of make that reasonably, oops, sorry, out of frame, that wasn't good. We get in the corners, we start standing our brush up a little straighter. And we're trying to get enough paint though that there's no little white specks showing through, especially if that paper's a little bit rougher. So the more you can keep the paint on the tip, the better, because if you get this full paint, then it tends to want to expand, and then you don't get a fine line. So it's going to be a little bit of a tough job to try to get that, you know, skin color if you have a skin color like that. But I'm not. If you're at home, you might have access to a bunch of different colors. I kind of messed up right there all before we even got started, but kind of resist the urge to use a bunch of colors. And now see, I've done all that, and look how much paint I've used. I haven't really touched that red. That red was so powerful that it didn't need hardly anything. So I didn't use hardly any of the magenta. I used a considerable amount of white, and a lot of times you'll find that that at paint supply stores, the white usually comes in a bigger tube, and I didn't use any of that kind of color. So you're just going to have to kind of experiment. And then what I would do is, I would probably take my water cup here, get the majority of the paint out so my hands aren't going to get all messy. I'll swish it back and forth. You can change the water out every once in a while. So just because it looks like it's clean, it's probably not. So then what you're going to do is take it underneath the water spigot and wash it. You can see that I still don't have all of it out. With a little bit of soap, that's going to be the easiest way to get it all out. And then just like we talked about the watercolor brushes, you want to make sure that it's pointed so that when it dries, it's drying in that pointed fashion, because it's going to want to retain that whatever shape it dries in. That's the way it's going to want to stay. So we're going to let that dry. It's only going to be a matter of a few minutes. It's probably already right now pretty dry that I could paint the next section on. I like to paint from light to dark, so whatever the lightest things are, I would probably paint this gray back here in his back. If I can point to the virtual one, like the inside of his coat, clear down in here. This is that gray, a little sliver of gray up in here. But probably you're going to be using a lot of white. So be really, really careful, especially with the strong colors like the blues and the reds are going to be way stronger than the yellows. So I would take a little bit of the red into the yellow, not the yellow into the red, because that red is to get that same color that I did right here. And if I used all that red, I would have a whole lot of paint. So that's really going to be key, is to make sure that you're aware of which color is more powerful, and you're going to bring that powerful color into the other one, but in small portions. And you can see that I probably, if I was going to do this again, I would have probably even added more white, because I think even though the lighting's kind of bad, I would still could lighten that skin tone up quite a bit. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, and we'll see what we can get. But then I'll show later on how we're going to finish this up.